So Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines anxiety to be the fear or nervousness about what might happen. And in our own lives, we have our own definition of anxiety, right? So how do you define anxiety? Some might define it as worry, panic, restlessness, apprehension, and the list goes on, right? But I think most of us really identify it with fear, right? And then in our lives, what do you think causes anxiety in your life? I'm sorry for the juxtaposition there. But so what causes anxiety in your life? Is it finances, academics, stress, sickness, rejection, and the list can just go on. And even this list itself could even be a trigger for anxiety. I mean, when I was making this list, I was really anxious. So, but however, everything in the end, really, what it boils down to is fear. Where'd that go? There it is. So that all boils down to fear, right? Well, we start thinking then, what is fear? Fear itself is a healthy God-created emotion, just like anger, joy, sadness, anything else that we feel. The Bible uses the word fear over 300 times, and we've probably heard this phrase many times, mostly found in Proverbs and Psalms. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom and understanding. However, later in 1 John chapter 4, verse 18, says, there is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made in perfect love. Psalm 34, verse 4, I sought the Lord, and he heard me, and he delivered me from all my fears. So I started thinking, well, how do I reconcile something that's healthy and God-created, and then these two views of saying, well, if you have this type of fear and that type of fear, like one is bad, one is good. Well, so I thought maybe there's a distinction between them. So there's a fear that gives life or preserves life, and another one that consumes or brings death to one's life. And the first one I'm going to talk about is fear of the Lord, which is about preserving life, giving life. And in Hebrew, it's called yirah, which kind of means a trembling fear and awe or reverence of something, in this case, God. And it breathes life into us. It puts us on a path to wisdom and understanding, because the one who has sewn atoms together and weaved me and you into existence has the same but opposite power to destroy us, but he chooses not to. The fear of the Lord is about perspective. That's what I think. And it puts us here, and it puts God infinitely larger than us, right? So we take a look at a few verses from Proverbs. One is, the fear of the Lord adds length to life, but the years of the wicked are cut short. The fear of the Lord is a fountain of life, turning a person from the snares of death. And I understand there's some poetry involved in Proverbs, right, and Psalms and everything, but I mean, it's pretty useful, just fear itself, like just thinking biologically, instinctive fear. It protects us. It keeps us safe from venomous spiders, falling off cliffs, and swimming with hungry sharks, you know. So even from an evolutionary point of view, many researchers believe fear ensures species survival, because if they have a chance to run away from something dangerous, they have a chance to reproduce and continue their line in their species. So on the other hand, then this is where I think anxiety lives, in a fear that consumes or kills life. And in Hebrew, that's called da'aga. And anxiety asks questions like, what if? Trying is the first step to failing. Will I have enough? How can I ever trust anyone again? I'm so worried about. You could fill in that however you want. And then we look at Proverbs 12:25. The first part says, anxiety weighs down the heart. And the second half says, but a kind word lifts it up. And then there's a whole section of Matthew, chapter 6, that talks about not worrying. And that talks about how Jesus is telling us not to worry, not to have anxiety, And he makes this comparison about how we store up our food in barns and we try to hold on to as much as we can. But the lilies of the field and the birds of the air, God provides for them. So why should we be worried about tomorrow? Because tomorrow has enough trouble for its own. And then I found a quote from Corrie ten Boom, which is a Dutch Christian that helped a lot of Jews get out of Germany and was imprisoned for that. And she says, anxiety is carrying tomorrow's load with today's strength, carrying 2 days at once. It is moving into tomorrow ahead of time. Anxiety doesn't empty tomorrow of its sorrows, it empties today of its strength. And then also, I was reading the Screwtape Letters, and I found this one little gem in there. If you're not familiar with it, it's a fictional book about a high-ranking demon writing to a fledgling demon, which so happens to be his nephew, and he gives him advice on how to capture people, ensnare people to go to hell. So it says, it is far better to make humans live in the future. Biological necessity makes all their passions point in that direction already. So that thought about the future inflames hope and fear. Also, it is unknown to them. So that in making them think about it, we make them think of unrealities. In a word, the future is, of all things, the thing least like eternity. Hence, nearly all vices are rooted in the future. Gratitude looks to the past, and love to the present. Fear, avarice, lust, and ambition, bless you, look ahead. He does not want men, God does not want men to give the future their hearts, to place their treasure in it. We do. So I found that pretty powerful, and that was something I was reading recently in preparation. And also I read books with my wife. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to recommend any books just because I don't really like reading myself. But what I can give is some practical steps later on that I'm going to cover. So what makes me so special, right? So why did I come here to talk to you guys? Well, I've lived the majority of my life in a secret anxiety. Like, I kept a lot of things to myself. I saw sharing my anxiety with other people as a weakness. So I kept my anxiety bottled up because I had anxiety about my anxiety, So it was about 1.5 years ago that anxiety blew up, and all that thing blew up on me. I was at a job working for the DEP, as Jonathan mentioned, and I hated my job, but I couldn't admit that because I felt like because I'm a Christian, I'm sent to where I need to go, I have to like my job. And because I hated my job and I lived in a secret anxiety, I decided to, and for whatever reason, I thought it was a great idea to falsify my time going into work, so I wouldn't be known as the guy who was being late. I wanted to be the perfect worker. I wanted to wow everyone there. And because of that, I was found out and my sins were brought into the light, pretty much. And that's not what I was really anxious about at the time. What I was really anxious and really afraid of was telling my wife that this has happened. Because now my sins are now affecting another person involuntarily. And I actually thought that I would rather die than tell her, because I thought that ultimately she would leave me and I would be alone like I thought I deserved to be. However, she's a loving woman, very forgiving. I mean, she was extremely angry with me. Don't get me wrong with that. I was definitely not off the hook with that. But she stuck around and she realized that I was repentant of what I had done. I mean, I had no choice at that point, and I think that's how I learned anyway. And from that experience, I decided that I needed to go see a therapist on a regular basis. And I was soon diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder and I still continue therapy to this day. And I also had done a program called Pure Desire, which came out of another program called Genesis Process. So if you guys look that up, those are pretty good programs for dealing with coping behaviors and stuff like that, and getting to the root of them and trying to uproot them and replace them with godly-centered behaviors. and ways to cope with like anxiety and stuff like that. So how do we fight against anxiety at this point? Well, first, for myself, what I need to do is I need to face my anxiety. Because when I don't look at my anxiety, right, the anxiety grows. And it grows way out of proportion. Because I'm not looking at it, I don't know what size it is. And not only that, just our emotions are a part of us. And to deny my fears is akin to denying myself. So I need to acknowledge that I'm afraid. And that fear is a natural, healthy emotion. And just like any other emotion, it really depends on what we do with it. So for instance, in anger, am I destructive? In sadness, am I implosive? In joy, am I ignorant? Or in fear, am I paralyzed? Second thing is I need to have grace for myself. And that's something I'm still working on. I find myself paralyzed if I don't have grace for myself, oftentimes. And that's because grace is very powerful. But it's only powerful if I let it be powerful in my life. God constantly pursues me, but do I take the time to stop and let him catch me? Not all the time. Do I root myself in affirming and encouraging scriptures? I try to do that. I'm not going to say I do that all the time. I try to do that. And I often separate myself from his pursuit because I don't think I'm worth it. And it's not that I don't think he loves me. I 100% truly believe that he loves me with a fervent love. It's just that I don't think I deserve that love. So in other words, I need to love myself better. And I am not equipped to address my anxiety if I don't love myself. The third thing is to stay in community. And what I mean by that is just stay around other Christians to be accountable with your anxiety. Because in isolation, like I was saying before, anxiety has the potential to grow out of control. And if you don't have another perspective of what your anxiety looks like to another person, then it can even grow much, much more. It's because I have no frame of reference of its actual size without community. So I found some safe people to share my anxiety with, like my men's group that I regularly attend, small circle of close friends. However, this only all works if I stay open and truthful with all these people and my therapist, my wife. And lastly, I carry my anxiety, or I carry my fears. And what I mean by that is kind of like carrying a cross. Just as Jesus carried his cross, we individually have our own crosses to carry, and anxiety is one of them for myself. And why I carry it is because I can't just say, I'm done with it, because it'll come back. It'll just keep coming back. But if I use the sledgehammer of grace to keep breaking that down into smaller pieces that are more manageable for me to carry, then I can just keep looking back at it and say, this is something I'm afraid of, but it's not that big of a deal. Because God is a bigger deal in my life because of that. So because of all that, and I learned how to fight my own anxiety through going to therapy and just doing these programs, I was able to start my own business, which is called Peplish Provisions. It's a hot sauce company, as Jonathan mentioned. And because I was able to address my anxiety, 2 years ago, I said I was going to start this business, and I didn't start it until a few months ago. And it wasn't until I finally stopped dragging my feet and I said, okay, I'm going to do this. And it's one of the most anxiety-ridden things I've ever done in my life, to start my own business. When I started, I had no idea what I was doing. I was just like, I make pretty good hot sauce. Let me go with that. And then everyone's like, oh, did you consider these laws, these regulations? Are you working out of a commercial kitchen? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? Are you contacting grocery stores? Do you have a distributor? And I'm like, what? I just make hot sauce. So The way that it's explained to me before, like starting your own business, is kind of like sitting on a lion. Everyone walks by, they see you sitting on this lion, they're like, oh man, I wish I could be like you. You have so much courage, you're so brave to do that. And then they keep walking on, minding their own business. And then I'm sitting there on the line thinking, this thing is going to eat me, what am I doing? This is just going to drag me down. But because I'm able to fight against my anxiety, I'm able to see a larger picture beyond that. I'm able to see that God has plans for me with this business, that he loves me, that he loves those I'm trying to address with my business. And secondly, if you guys remember David's blunder with Bathsheba, David wrote in Psalm 51 about it, saying, restore to me the joy of your salvation and grant me a willing spirit to sustain me. Then I will teach transgressors your ways so that sinners will turn back to you. So, I'm here because I believe that you're all worth my time and my experiences. And I hope that my experiences help you be able to fight your own anxieties and show you that you don't have to live the way that you're living, that there is something better for you. And lastly, I just want to encourage you guys to resist the world's ideology of a performance-based existence, like Jonathan was saying before. That is not who you are, and that's not what you do. You are a child of God, created in his image.